Okay, we're going to talk about the election of 1824 and then the election of 1828. They kind of go together because of what happened. Excuse me. We already know that by 1824, the era of good feelings is over. There are more and more disagreements on the role of the federal government based on which region of the country a person lived, either west, north, or south. And even though we don't have officially two political parties yet, we do have a split within the Democratic Republicans in 1824. Andrew Jackson runs. He wins the most popular vote, but not a majority. It's like 47% or so. John Quincy Adams, Monroe's very successful Secretary of State, wins the second most popular vote. Henry Clay wins the third most popular vote, and then there was a fourth candidate, William Crawford. We've done this before. When no candidate receives a majority of the electoral vote, the decision as to who becomes president goes to the House of Representatives. They throw out the least, or rather, they only take the two most vote getters. So in this instance, it's John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. But because neither got a majority, and Henry Clay did place third, whoever Henry Clay ends up supporting is going to have a majority and will be able to win over in the House of Representatives. So there is all sorts of speculation as to who Clay is support. Clay was not a fan of Jackson. He was unhappy with his escapades into Florida, shall we say. He ends up backing John Quincy Adams. And there's some political reasons why. He also was a nationalist, just like Adams. They were both advocates of Clay's American system. And so once Henry Clay asks his supporters to back Adams, Adams is elected president. Jackson and his supporters lose it. It's unfair. I received the most popular vote. I should be president, even though we know that that's not what elects the president. But the thing that really sort of cemented it for Jackson was the fact that John Quincy Adams names Henry Clay his Secretary of State. And I'm going to have a chart in class on the board that will show you this pattern that we've been dealing with in terms of the fact that Secretary of State seemed to be the stepping stone to the presidency. There was no evidence that any sort of deal was struck, that, Adams approached Clay and said, if you support me, I'll make you Secretary of State. Although that was not illegal had he even chose to do that. Clay was more politically aligned with Adams, so it made sense. But the fact that he was given that very prestigious position plagued Adams and his supporters during John Quincy Adams' presidency. Now, John Quincy Adams was such an effective president that we're going to skip over his term altogether. He did not have much success. Like his father, he was difficult to work with. And because he was very much a nationalist and was looking at things in a broad national picture, different sections of the country, particularly the South, were unhappy with many of the things that he proposed to do. And so in 1828, we're ready for the next presidential election. And this time we have a more aligned split, a more specific split between what they call themselves National Republicans. This is predominantly the Northeast. They're going to continue to support Adams. And the Democratic Republicans, made up of the South and West, who are going to support Jackson. This time Jackson wins easily. Now, this side note that I'm going to talk about is something that you really need to remember about the Jacksonian period. We talked about early in our history, once we write the Constitution or whatever, that most states had a property qualification for voting, which meant if you didn't own property, you couldn't vote. And this is white males. By 1828, most states have gotten rid of the property requirement for voting. So all white males now are going to be able to vote. That's going to change the electorate considerably. The needs, the education level, what they expect the government to do or not do. So this getting rid of the property requirement for voting is a huge step in our political development in terms of becoming more democratic. Jackson, of course, loved by the common people, assumes office and decides he's going to do something that no president has done before. He's the president of the common man. He's going to open up the White House on Inauguration Day and invite anybody who wants to come to the inaugural party. So hundreds of people show up, and these are not people who are used to perhaps the formalness of previous inaugural parties, and this thing just becomes a mob. And in fact, he gets nicknamed King Mob after the inauguration. And you can imagine John Quincy Adams and those stuffy Northeasterners, and even in the South, the very aristocratic Southern planters, looking at the White House and thinking, my gosh, what has happened to our country? The mob was so bad that Jackson had to be taken out the back door of the White House. Literally, they were afraid he was going to be killed because there were so many people cramming themselves in the White House. And interestingly enough, they managed to empty all of these people out of the White House when they take the whiskey barrels and put them out on the front lawn instead of in the house itself. So the inauguration sounds like it was a, good old time. But for Jackson to begin a presidency this way, there's going to be a lot of doubters. And then of course, he still has huge support from the average American. One of the things that Jackson does is he feels like the president is the winner, and there's a saying that goes back to the Greeks, to the victor go the spoils, and the spoils of war were the money, the land, whatever you were able to conquer of your enemy then became yours to do with as you chose. And so Jackson very much had that view in terms of being president. And so he replaced numerous federal employees with his own supporters without regards to their qualification for the job. Now, we still do this, presidents still do this to some extent. They reward their political supporters with federal positions, but they generally have some sort of background or training in the area that the president is putting them into. And that wasn't necessarily true here with Jackson. It was just like, here, Joe Bob, go be part of the tax office. So probably some potential issues going to occur there. But this is going to solidify the idea, too, that it pays off to be loyal to one particular party. So instead of looking at political issues and evaluating those issues and the candidates' positions on those issues, if you are going to support this party and you stay supportive, there will be a reward for you ultimately. So the idea of the spoils system really was part of Jackson's philosophy towards government, and it is still around. This is not anything that we've certainly done away with. I'm going to stop at this point because the next topic with Jackson is the nullification crisis, and that's going to take me a good 10 minutes. So see you next time.